in his West Wing office, suspicious at word a plane had struck the World Trade Center, watching TV, hoping his instincts were wrong.
It's a clear day, there's no weather problem, and then we saw the second airplane actually hit in real time. And that was, that moment you knew this was a deliberate act, and it was a terrorist act.
A call to the traveling president, urgent conversations with top aides, and then a burst through the door.
My agent all of a sudden materialized beside me and said, "Sir, we have to leave now," and grabbed me and propelled me out of my office and down the hall into the underground shelter in the White House.
In White House shorthand, it is the POC, the Presidential Emergency Operations Center.
Oh, I didn't know that it existed till I was actually down there, and I'm not sure I could find my way back there to this day.
A Cold War relic deep underground, and the Vice President's base of operations on the first day of a new war.
There's only one reason we would be headed for the POC on a day when planes were attacking America. And at one point, they came in and said there's a plane 5 miles out. Now, a plane 5 miles out, traveling at 350 to 500 miles per hour, doesn't take long to arrive, and so that was a wrong bit of information that added to the drama.
That was the plane that slammed the Pentagon. Then a report of a plane over Pennsylvania headed for Washington. Twice, a military aide asks the Vice President for authority to shoot it down.
The Vice President said yes again, and the aide then asked a third time. He said, "Just confirming, sir, authority to engage." And the Vice President, his voice got a little annoyed then, said, "I said yes."
It was a rare flash of anger from a man who knew he was setting the tone at a White House in crisis.
I think there was an undertone of anger there, but it's more a matter of determination. You don't want to let your anger overwhelm your judgment at a moment like that.
Word that Flight 93 had crashed in Pennsylvania. A scramble to find out if a military jet had shot it down. Aides frantically called the Pentagon.
But the Vice President was a little bit ahead of us, actually. I think he was a step ahead of us. He said, sort of softly and to nobody in particular, I think an act of heroism just took place on that plane.
The Vice President and aides watched in horror as the first tower of the World Trade Center collapsed.
It was a remarkable moment, a very emotional moment for everybody.
Oddly, just everything just stopped, not for long, but it did stop totally at that moment.
And the Vice President said nothing?
No, but he emoted in the way that he emotes, which was to stop.
Back to business included comparing notes on the tail numbers of planes still unaccounted for.
It was about 12:15, 12:20 when I said to the Vice President, "Mr. Vice President, all the planes are down." And he said, "Great, thank you very much."
A recommendation that it was too risky for the Vice President to stay at the White House, a possible target.
They wanted to depart the White House to one of the alternate locations, undisclosed locations that we subsequently got to know pretty well.
He said no.
I had communications with the President, communications with the Pentagon, Secret Service and so forth, and we could continue to operate there, and if I left, I'd lose all of that.
Lynn Cheney was a constant presence, leaning in at one point to tell the Vice President their daughters were fine.
It's something you think about, but again, it's not so much a personal consideration at that point. It may have been for people who didn't have anything to do.
It was the bunker's first test in an actual emergency, a day of crisis, not without a few hitches. The Vice President wanted to track TV reports of the devastation and listen in on communications with the Pentagon.
You could have sound on one or the other, and he found that technically imperfect in the 20th century.
A few words with the President just before his address to the nation. The CIA director watched from the bunker, waiting for the President to convene a late-night meeting of the National Security Council.
I guess the thing I was struck by was the extent to which he'd begun to grapple with these problems and to make decisions, that we were in a war on terror.
A final word with the President, then a late-night helicopter ride past the Pentagon.
I recall watching the Vice President, who was staring out the window at the Pentagon and wondering, what he may be thinking about the responsibilities that he will have in the future. Pretty sobering moment.
Did he ever say anything about any of that, or?
Not exactly his style.
It is a memory he says has shaped every day in the long year since. As
we lifted off and headed up the Potomac, you could look out and see the Pentagon and see that black hole where they'd been hit. A lot of lights on the building, smoke rising from the Pentagon, and it helped really bring home the impact of what had happened that day, that we had in fact been attacked.
In that conversation I had with the Vice President, he said during his days in the Ford administration, then at the height of the Cold War, and even in his days as Defense Secretary in the first Bush administration, they had trained for an attack on the Pentagon, but only in the scenario of a nuclear war. The Vice President said that flight that night forever moved him, and he has given recent speeches saying that attack on America has forever changed the rules when it comes to national security.